Is there a legitimate, non-religious case to be made against abortion? So just yesterday, as of the recording of this video, a document was leaked from the Supreme Court where one of the Supreme Court justices has written a ruling or an opinion that looks like over the next few months it's possible that Roe v. Wade may be overturned. And so there's a lot of discussion around what the implications of this will be, and I think ultimately what it means that those decisions will be kicked back to the states then to decide what to do on the issue of abortion at the state level. And this raises a broader question for us about the morality of abortion. And our laws ultimately are laws about moral things, about what is right and what is wrong and what we should do as a society. And so when it comes to abortion, it's a really sensitive topic for many, for a whole variety of reasons. But one of the accusations against those who hold the pro-life position is that we only hold this position because of a certain religious conviction. And I think this is a problematic view to have, and I think pro-life people need to be ready to push back against this. So I want to give the case, I think, for the pro-life position. And while it is a moral issue, and it's something that is very consistent with Christianity, if we're speaking just in moral terms that society as a general rule agrees on, I think we can make a strong case for the pro-life position. And it would go something like this, and we call this the SLED argument, okay? So as a society, in general, Western culture, really across all cultures, we know that murder is wrong. So we can define murder as the unjustified taking of another human being. So unjustified taking the life of another human being. And we know this is wrong, right? So for me to take the life of one of my own children or my neighbor or my boss because I didn't like them, whatever it is, we know I took the life and it was unjustified, therefore it is wrong. And there's a difference in murder and someone being killed because one has this sort of moral layer to it that it was not justified. Whereas maybe in war, we would say that the killing of some individual is bad and awful and unfortunate, etc. But there may be moral justification in that happening. Or maybe in the case of self-defense, for instance, would be another case where it wouldn't be considered murder, though you did take the life of someone else. So the case to be made with abortion is that when we take the life of the unborn, it's an unjustified killing or an unjustified taking the life of another human being. Now, so the question that presses in, it ultimately is the question that has to be answered if we're going to rule on the moral status of abortion is, what is the unborn? What is the unborn? If the unborn is a human being, then abortion is the unjustified taking the life of a human being. That's what it is. And it would be in the same category as taking life outside of the womb, which we would define as murder. And so the question then presses on us, how do we define what the unborn is? And this is where the SLED argument comes in. And I want to argue, and I think this is consistent with both science and philosophy, that the unborn is a human being. And there's really no argument, I don't think, to make a case otherwise. So SLED is the way that we would approach this. So the difference between the unborn and those outside the womb, there's really only 4 key distinctions that we're going to use the SLED acronym to talk about. So size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So these are the only 4 real substantial differences between those inside the womb and those outside the womb. So size is an obvious one. Those in the womb are smaller than those outside the womb. And size is never a justification for taking the life of another human being. And so we can see that that difference or that distinction between the unborn and the born is not one that would justify the taking the life of that unborn child. So the next one is L, level of development. So those inside the womb are less developed than those outside the womb. So the unborn are less developed, we can say mentally, physiologically, psychologically, their bodies, everything about them is less developed than those outside the womb. Now, but also 1-year-olds are less developed than 2 and 3-year-olds, and 3-year-olds less developed than 4, 5, 6-year-olds. So human beings are on a spectrum in terms of development. So an unborn child is very less developed, but one that's born is still the mental and rational capacities are not fully developed yet. Their ability to speak, their bodies are not fully developed and functioning as they ultimately will. And so we see that this difference between the unborn and the born is, again, one just on a continuum, and it is not a justification for taking the life of the unborn. And we see this by knowing level of development outside the womb is never a justification for taking someone's life. So again, size, level of development, neither one of these are morally sufficient justifications for taking life. Okay, so we have size, level of development, and then E is environment. So some people think that just because the unborn is inside the womb, that's sufficient grounds for us to be able to take their life. But really the only distinction here that we're talking about is the environment. So one is inside the womb and one is outside the womb. And again, there's nothing about this key difference between the unborn and the born in terms of what they are. There's just a difference in where they're at. And again, another morally insufficient justification for taking life. The last one's the degree of dependency. So we have size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. So those inside the womb are more dependent than those outside the womb for their life, their sustenance. Okay, but again, like these others, there's a continuum. So a newborn baby still has a degree of dependency on the mother, and that dependency starts to lessen. But then also people that are in hospitals or under medical care may be completely dependent on someone else for their life to continue going. Maybe it's for a short period of time or a long period of time. And that dependency on someone else for life is never a justification for taking that life of that individual. And so for these 4 reasons, it's really difficult to think of any other significant difference between the unborn and the born. Those inside the womb and those outside the womb. There's no other real significant category that would make any sort of case to be, for there to be justification for taking the life of the unborn. And so it's for this reason that the unborn are human beings, right? Like the only differences are superficial differences that don't affect the essence of the unborn. And so the unborn are human beings just like those outside the womb. And even scientifically, we know this to be true. And the unborn is a human being at the early stages of development, and someone who's older is a human being in the later stages of development in their life. And so if murder is the unjustified taking of human life, then that is exactly what abortion is. It's a very sound and fairly airtight argument that we're not bringing the Bible into this discussion, just looking at this on generally agreeable moral principles, we can see that abortion is wrong. And so the question is when we make exceptions or justifications for it, are those justifications sufficient to override this general moral piece of knowledge that we have that it's wrong to take the life of a human being? And I would say none of those justifications we offer are sufficient to accomplish that task. And for that reason, abortion is wrong, and I think it's right that it would be illegal in our country for it to continue to be practiced.